Hey, Pyrrho, I think I kind of see where our point of disagreement is. Yeah, I've often thought that you have too narrow a definition of metaphysics, but I also think you have kind of an expansionary hegemonic definition of physics. You're basically saying everything is physics. Anything that interacts with anything is physical. So basically all interactions are physics, and basically that makes physics the default category that overlaps everything, therefore making no room for metaphysics. Um, so first of all, I think that one reason I think that's too broad is there are kinds of interactions which would not be described as physical by most physicists. When you're watching this video of me right now, I mean, physically what's happening is, there's photons coming from the computer monitor, and there's vibrations from your speakers that are moving air particles into your ears, and then some that goes through different nerves, and it's this neural network, and then you have a response. Um, but phenomenologically, what's going on is these expulsions of air that are coming out of mouth come to you as language, which you understand because we come from the same culture, which speaks the same language, and that's something that physics wouldn't really be able to measure. I mean, that's because that's sort of an interior relation, and that's what I think we get with physics, is that physics measures exterior relations. Um, I guess there could be some sort of um, wiggle room when it comes to quantum mechanics, because there you have like the observer effect, and there may be some important philosophical ramifications for that. Um, yeah, and you mentioned when I responded to your video that there's something about a semantic disagreement, and I never thought that this disagreement was anything other than semantic. I mean, we basically agree on the fundamentals, but I think some semantic arguments are worth having, because the task of philosophy, or at least one of the tasks, is to clarify what we mean by what we say, and that's why I kind of don't understand. You claim to be a relativist, but you seem to be fairly unbudging when it comes to language. You seem to have very fixed, absolute definitions of what we mean by certain terms, um, and I think that Wittgenstein, in his later work on the philosophical investigations, did a pretty good job of debunking the kind of absolutist view of language, which he had previously defended. Um, when he talked about language games, the different way that we use words depending on their different sets of rules according to certain interactions, and how the meaning of a term, or the different meanings of the term, don't necessarily have some underlying logical structure, but rather kind of a family resemblance. Which means if we want to understand what we mean by a word, we don't look up a dictionary definition, but look at how that word is used. And so with metaphysics, we have to look at how that word is used. I mean, it's basically answering questions like, what is there and what is it like? You know. So, and I also think you have kind of really fixed absolute view of categories. That basically physics is everything. So therefore, there could be no room for for anything other than physics, or certainly nothing beyond physics. But I think that that actually kind of gets into what I was getting at with the whole substance versus process thing. That's kind of a substance view of categories, that things can't overlap like that, and I think categories can overlap. I mean, it's for me, it's not problematic to think there might be some overlap between metaphysics and physics. That's not to say that the metaphysics is the same as physics, but there's some areas where I think the metaphysics of one era could become the physics of another. That's not a problem for me, because I understand that definitions are fluid. Um, and there's always some interdisciplinary thing, like philosophy overlaps with every discipline known to man. I mean, and maybe there's no philosophy of dog catching, though I'm sure that now they mentioned it, some philosopher might go about and come up with one. Um, but I mean, there's philosophy of language. There's there's philosophy of teaching. There's philosophy of everything. And so, how would you think of this this idea? Metaphysics is where philosophy meets physics. It's where the philosophical investigation of what how we understand physics and what I guess I'm saying something here that I'm being a little bit devil's advocate because it's not quite what I agree with, but I think that's part of it. I think that the metaphysics can be sort of the philosophical component of physics, but it's more than that because I think that's the overlapping area of physics and metaphysics. But there's also metaphysical ideas that I don't think physics would ever be able to address. I mean, look at Kashify's whole Vedantic stuff about the world is an illusion. None of this really exists. It's sort of solipsism about that. Could physics ever disprove that? Could physics ever falsify solipsism? Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of different things like that where I think you could never really get from metaphysics to physics in those areas. Yeah, and you can argue over whether those things are useful or not. I think I guess what a comparable idea to metaphysics I would come up with is what Robert Anton Wilson referred to as reality tunnels. It's the view through the lens through which you're viewing the world. Another thing I didn't see you address in the previous video was what I mentioned about interior relations. Then there's exterior relations, which physics measures, and there's phenomenological interactions, like our linguistic interaction here. And I was saying that a good metaphysics doesn't necessarily address that, but I think a good metaphysics would be able to explain both the phenomenological and the physical under one unifying theory. So I guess I'll leave it there. Peace.